Right, so I've been waiting for a while to make this video, this prediction video, because I had a very real concern whether or not the fight would actually take place. That might have been echoed by a few of you, and some of you might be like, what the hell, it was always going to take place. I've waited until, we have a venue, they've done the press tour, and we had like a gloves are off kind of, well, something similar gloves are off event that was at least started off somewhat cordial. But now that we've had these kind of milestones, I think it's far more likely to happen than it is not to happen. Especially now that Tyson, I think, has officially joined the clean boxing program of the WBC. So we can talk about the fight. As some of you might kind of becoming aware of the fact that I don't really have, with the exception of maybe Sergio Martinez, I have never really been emotionally invested in a boxer. Maybe I wanted George Groves to beat Carl Froch, but with that exception, generally I look at boxing in a very objective sense. So if I'm saying something, it's my opinion that I've tried to base on fact, with very little emotion feeding into that, I think. So straight off the bat, I think this is pretty easy fight for Tyson Fury. And that's a bold statement. That's a measure that I'm saying it's an easy fight in comparison to something like, I think this is an easier fight for him than Vladimir Klitschko was. And the reason I say this is because I think, as Dwyer Boxing likes to say, knockouts give amnesia. And for anyone that's been watching Deontay Wilder's career quite closely, and watching his development quite closely, this man is, without doubt, the hardest puncher I think we've seen in quite a long time in boxing. Extraordinarily powerful. But he is very, very limited technically. He struggles to throw a jab. In circumstances, he can throw a somewhat effective jab, but given his height and reach, he should be a lot more effective with it than he is. I think you only just look at the Ortiz fight. Now, Ortiz was by far and away his stiffest competition, and I think he lost almost every round bar two. I mean, there's there are countless not countless, but there are a lot of examples of Wilder being outboxed, but still then coming back to win. However, if I'm basing the Fury that steps into the ring on something like the Vladimir Klitschko Fury, he was able to hold his concentration right up to the 12th round, in which case I think he got a bit tired. So I'm not saying that Deontay Wilder can't win. I think that I can absolutely see Deontay Wilder catching a late KO. But unless Tyson Fury switches off, I don't see how Wilder is able to create the opportunities, because very rarely does he set anything up off a jab. Very, very rarely. I mean, when he fought Washington, again, he was being outboxed and he kind of relies on the... He's almost like a Manny Pacquiao that doesn't throw his signature punch often enough. In fact, he's more like Manny Pacquiao now I'm thinking about it than I realize, because if you watch the Ortiz fight, when Wilder doesn't have the confidence to land the right hand, he just doesn't throw it. Almost at all. He just doesn't let it go. Pacquiao was very similar, that unless he has the confidence to land the punch, he stops throwing it. And we were so used to seeing Pacquiao steamroll everyone that we weren't used to not seeing him throw the straight left. Wilder, obviously, with the straight right, is just... When he clips Ortiz, he becomes an entirely different fighter. Suddenly the right hand's being thrown with regularity. He gets hyped. But the moment he steps into his own head, I think Wilder almost defeats himself. He starts overthinking, and he doesn't have the technical ability to kind of bring that thinking, to translate the thought into the action. Maybe it's a schooling thing, I'm not sure, but it's it's certainly very interesting. And again, I don't want to misrepresent. When I say it's an easy fight for Tyson Fury, I mean he just has to replicate what he's already done before. If he fought the same way he did against Klitschko, he wins this fight, with the exception of the 12th round. He probably wins every second of every round, with the exception of the 12th. Because Wilder doesn't really, he's not a pressure fighter. In fact, he's quite ineffective when he, I mean, we all kind of have seen when he tries to finish someone, he's very wild. But I don't mean that. I mean when he's setting up the damage, when he's setting up that prior to the kind of windmill fighting. And it's odd because he was trying to establish like a counter left hook against Ortiz. And I've watched this fight a few times before making this because I think quite often a boxer is only good as they are in their kind of weakest showing, unless they've made some very real changes. I think if you compare Tyson Fury to who he was when he was knocked down by, I forget, I don't mean the cruiserweight, I mean, anyway, his very first professional knockdown. If you look at the style in which he was fighting, it was quite come forward, quite aggressive, kind of high guard, and it was almost after kind of he was knocked down for the second time that he decided to kind of recreate his style and adopted a very Vladimir Klitschko approach. Now I find Tyson Fury now quite difficult to watch. I appreciate boxing probably more than most, but what he can do as a man that's 6'9", I think he is, with an 85-inch reach, I think. What he can do, heightened and weight-wise, is incredible. No man that large and that heavy should be able to move the way he does. But I don't think it's good for the sport. I would much rather Deontay Wilder win the fight, if I'm honest, and set up a mega fight. I think they probably have a rematch clause, but if they didn't, I would rather see Wilder and Joshua face off for the sake of the sport. I think it would be a much more entertaining fight. I think it'd be a little bit tentative to begin with, but I think it would have the potential to explode. It would be very unlikely for a Wilder and Fury fight to explode. I mean, I could see Wilder hurting Fury at any point in the fight and running into a counter. He ran into a really sweet counter against Ortiz when he thought he had Ortiz hurt. And I think Ortiz hits a lot harder than Tyson Fury, if I'm honest. Tyson Fury is more of a kind of combination puncher, although Ortiz throws combinations too. And the reason I'm focusing so heavily on Ortiz is because it's the first time we've really seen somebody be able to test Wilder kind of consistently. The Washington fight was a test, I suppose, but this was, and I think Ortiz is an elite heavyweight. I really do. I think he reminds me of very much of Odlanier Solis. I guess they're both Cuban. Just kind of unfulfilled potential, but much less so in Ortiz's case than Odlanier Solis' case. He was a crying shame. I would have loved to see the fight with him and Klitschko pan out. Was it his knee that collapsed? I think it was his knee. I would love to have seen how that would pan out. But anyway, I've maybe been a bit too rash with saying it's I still honestly maintain it's an easy fight for Tyson Fury. I'll be I put money on Fury to beat Klitschko because it was the same thing. Klitschko had never really fought someone with a longer reach than he had, and he really struggled with it. I think Deontay Wilder would really struggle with range against Tyson Fury. I don't think he's going to know how to get past Fury's jab. He's going to then be awkward and try and come forward and get caught with punches and probably get frustrated and maybe get a bit wild. And he could clip Fury. Fury could run out of gas. I mean, Fury's only 2 fights removed from a bout of depression and cocaine addiction. But I think in terms of fundamentals and technicalities, I think this is an easy fight for Fury. I think people were going to be surprised at how one-sided this might actually be. Again, but we shouldn't be. Look at the Ortiz fight. I think he won 2 rounds from 10, maybe 3. And Ortiz is much smaller, much less physically capable of dealing with somebody like Wilder is. So, we'll see. I said I think my bet would probably be Fury to win the fight on points, and maybe hedged with Wilder by KO if you were of a betting nature. But I don't even know if I'm going to bet on it. I might just watch it. I thought Fury would be more of an underdog than he is. Actually, I thought people would. Yeah, I think he's getting there. I think the early odds had him as favorite. Now he's actually the underdog. And of course, there is always the mental factor with Tyson Fury. And this also kind of was one of the kind of contributing factors to me wondering if the fight would even pan out. I think very recently he put a tweet out to Baby Miller offering him a bare knuckle fight, or sparring and or a bare knuckle fight for 100,000. I mean, those aren't the actions of somebody who is focusing entirely on the biggest fight of their life. Is it fair to say Wilder's a bigger fight than Klitschko? I think it probably is, all things considered. And with that kind of mental unpredictability, anything can happen. Was it Riddick Bowe that came apart in the ring? I think it was Riddick Bowe. Maybe please feel free to correct me that he kind of sat on his stool and was crying, was kind of inconsolable, and just had a mental breakdown in the ring pretty much. I'm not saying that will happen to Fury, but I think it's definitely in the realm of possibility. If he gets hurt or something, or if he's losing the fight for whatever reason, anything could happen. But all things considered, I still think the Fury wins this quite comfortably. I don't think Wilder's going to be able to reach him. I want him to. I'd like to see Wilder win. I'd like it to be a great fight. I'd like Wilder to kind of somehow coach or coerce Fury into making a fight of it, to doing more than just kind of jabbing and moving. But I don't know if he'll be able to. The best thing Wilder could do is just walk to the middle of the ring, put his arms kind of out wide and say, come on, and then step back and force Fury to step forward. Otherwise, if he starts chasing, I think it's going to be a very long and potentially embarrassing 12 rounds for Wilder. But he's got bucket loads of stamina, and if he can get past the mental kind of concern of taking one to give one, and just let that right hand fly, eventually Fury could just switch off and lose concentration and it could be over. But I think all Fury has to do to win the fight is just stay focused and composed and mentally healthy for 12 rounds and he wins. I don't think it's quite clear, or it certainly doesn't feel like it's as clear to me how the kind of disparity between these two boxers. Honestly, I think Fury is a much better boxer. And I think Wilder could be in some very uncomfortable situations here. But I think he's got a lot of heart, and I don't think he'll be afraid to ask himself these questions. He just needs to prevent himself from locking up, because you're never going to win in a chess match with Tyson Fury. He needs to push and pump that volume and make Fury work, right? Make the fat big guy who's been inactive work. Alright, I think that about covers it. Let me know what your thoughts are. Apologies for any Wilder fans. He's a fantastic representative of the sport, give or take the body thing. I love watching him fight. He's always entertaining, nearly always entertaining. He ends in, 98% of the time he ends by KO. He's knocked everyone out he fought. I don't want him to lose. I just think that he's not in the realms of skill that Tyson Fury has, and all Fury has to do is avoid the right hand and he wins. And I guess you could say all Wilder has to do is land the right hand, but I think it's far easier for Fury to avoid that all night than it is for Wilder to land it consistently. But he only needs to land it once, so we'll see. I'm very excited to see it. I hope it does happen, and I'll see you all really soon.